go have some fun.
So many like world issues, but
Well, I think
then again,
it's raised so many ethical questions, man. Like I was
yeah.
talking to a friend, and this whole idea of masks, right? Like I'm still on the fence with wearing it in some situations. But it's one of those things that they said they wear it all the time because they're afraid that if they get it and give it to somebody and they die, that it's their fault that that person died. And
So
I'm wondering to myself, is it actually their fault that they died? What is your opinion?
I just did a practical. So for those that don't know me, I study biomedical science, which
Welcome to
means
episode 5, by the way.
this is episode 4. Episode
Wait,
4.
oh, so this is still the bonus.
No. This is not the bonus now. This is episode 4 because we've released episode 3, and that's
Okay,
a bonus episode. It doesn't count
that's-
towards the episode count.
That's what you mean. All
But
right.
that's what I'm talking. Yeah.
Welcome
This
to
is
episode 4.
Welcome. Hello. How are we all? So I study biomedical science, which means I deal a lot with medical guidelines and then ethical theories that kind of offer guidance in making ethical decisions, I guess. And I've got my notes in front of me for the first practical that I did. The entire practical was about ethics. The entire practical. So I'm gonna just talk for a bit, and you're gonna give me some feedback because I think this is gonna be fun.
No, I had no idea you do ethics in biomed. So
Absolutely, dude. It's like, who do you give the medicine to? The person that's like got this symptom, the person that's got that symptom. So there is, we got taught that there was 4 different types of, 5 different types of ethical principles. Can't believe I've already forgotten that. It was only last week. So there was a dilemma solution that we were given, and it was, I hope I don't get in trouble for reciting this. This is stuff that we were taught, so it's in my practical notes, so I don't really care. An elderly woman with dementia asked her nurse every day whether her husband will be visiting that day. The nurse knows that the woman's husband died several years ago, but he does not want to upset her by reminding her of this. And then the question that we were posed was, what do each of the 5 ethical theories covered suggest is the right thing to do here? And then we were also given one about COVID, in that, you know, this elderly man had these symptoms, but this younger child also had these symptoms. And they were wondering, who would you give the experimental, let's say, vaccine to? Because, you know, you've got someone that's so young, you've got someone that's so elderly, and it's whether or not, one, there's all sorts of ethical problems when it comes to actually administering something to someone, because you have no clue what the adverse side effects are going to be for it. Like, how would you approach something that's, okay, look, we don't know what the adverse side effects are, but we'll essentially say, okay, we're going to give you this money or something, or you'll get this in return if anything does happen. But would the people that are giving that particular medicine feel bad about it? You know, how are they going to document the effects that are there? Like, is this person under close monitoring? Are they actually giving a crap about him? Like, that's kind of ethical stuff, I guess. So I'll go through the ethical theories. If this does get boring, tell me to stop. You're over here for me, by the way. That's why the camera's, I'm looking over here.
It's all right.
So there's virtue ethics, which is basically act the way a virtuous person would act. So it's essentially, you know, the right thing to do at all times. And then virtue is kind of in the mean Aristotelian ethics is kind of like what you're talking about here. Like, this is like way before Christ, you know, before Christ, 340 BC. So courage is found in the middle of cowardice and rashness. So you have people, you can be a coward or you can be rash and make decisions. So a coward is like not rushing to make decisions, whereas rashness is obviously rushing to make those decisions anyway. And I think courage is kind of the in-between, because you have to consider both sides. Like, what are the two, I don't know, differences here, that what could happen in one side, what could happen to the other? You know, there's a morality is not just like following those rules. It's kind of learning how to use reason and feeling to make those decisions, if that makes any sense at all. And that
It makes
kind
sense,
of,
but there's a lot to take in.
that's a lot to take in, right? Yeah. And I found this so interesting. So I will keep going. But I think and we've also got a list of like pros and cons to each of these ethical values too. So like a pro of that one is that it takes a more holistic view of what makes something right or someone right. Like, are they a right person? You know, there's room for emotion. It's not like, you know, I think a lot of medical people have to consider that this is the right thing to do, but I'm not going to necessarily feel good about it. Like, does this person need surgery or does that person need surgery? Like, this one deserves it more. Does he? Does she? Like, that's. Next one is deontology, which is basically you act in accordance with the moral rules. And this is what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily what medical practitioners follow, but it's the cons and pros are kind of very, very different. Like, the pros are that it has very clear guidelines in that you follow, your actions are judged by whether you fulfill the duties of one other person. So they could be cultural, religious, familial. So like whether your family approves of it or your culture approves of it or your religion approves of it. Essentially, ethical decisions are based on universal rules. So there's no real emotional influence involved at all. So, you know,
Well,
someone that's
where
giving,
does that universal rule come from, though? Does that just come from
I guess, what you're taught. Like,
tradition?
so culture could be an Australian tradition, like, or like a scientific tradition. Like, you've got, okay, we give this to someone,
But what
right?
happens?
But we're not going to have any emotion in it. We're not going to think about, we're not necessarily going to think about how that person could feel after it happens. We're going to do it because it's what's best for us to do.
So does that mean you kind of have to become a robot? Like you have to
Kind of,
just you have to
kind of. You
just
can appear,
remove all your emotions and just follow this set rules that for some reason you've been told are right.
yeah. You can
But
kind
is
of
that
appear very
ethical?
cold. But that's the thing. These are different ethical theories on how to approach a situation. Like,
But
some of these
okay,
can appear very
but is
cold,
this
some of them can
ethical?
appear very warm. To certain people, 100%. They're probably like, okay, you know, I don't have to involve my emotions in this. Like, my emotions aren't required. This is a specific logic question. This is, okay, this is what I should do no matter how that party feels about it. Um, and, you know, I have a certain obligation to do this. Whereas virtue ethics before is more so you're looking at how, you know, someone would feel about a particular issue, in that, okay, this person is upset, I should do this because it's the right thing to do. Whereas
Oh,
if someone was upset in deontology, you'd be, okay, I'm going to do this because I think it's the right thing to do for that person, regardless of how they feel.
okay.
That
All
makes
right.
any sense?
I see what you mean. It's just like a model of ethics.
Yeah,
Whether it's really ethical is like another ethical question. So it's a bit of a loophole, I guess.
it is. Yes.
Yeah.
So the next one is called consequentialism, which is essentially, I'm just going to read the quote that I have in front of me as well. It's the easiest thing to do to explain it anyway. The right thing to do is that which generates the best consequences for all. So the greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? So it considers everyone in the situation, and I think this one can also feel a bit cold, because you're thinking of people affected by the situation, but you're not actually treating those people as people. You're treating them as numbers. Like, say there's 100 people there. Say you've got one option that does good for 50 of them, and you've got one option that does good for 90 of them, but those 10 suffer. You're going to do that option anyway, because there's
But I
a
think
greater
that,
number of people
but
benefiting
this
from
one
that
makes the most
situation.
sense, to be honest, because it's like, it's the whole idea of cancel culture, right? Like, there's always
Yeah,
going to be
yeah,
one person who's upset, but you can't really,
absolutely.
if you try to talk to all 100, you talk to nobody, right?
Oh,
So,
exactly. Like, there's I think this is probably what applies to, like, um, SARS-CoV testing to begin with. Like, you know, this we're going to test 100 people for this vaccine that have coronavirus, that are positive for coronavirus anyway, and we're going to see what it does to them. 10 could suffer badly and 90 would do very well. You know, they wouldn't have any symptoms. They'd be clear of the virus in their tests and cultures. But, you know, you're treating those people like numbers. They're not necessarily, with all testing, I think you're treating people like numbers. You're not really looking into the fact that what they've had. Like, okay, you're going to get money for this. We'll give you like a couple of $100 for you to test this, or this is for the good of the country. Like, you could appeal to someone's good and better nature for that as well.
But in this scenario, I think if you're honest, and I think most like even any vaccine will have the worst case scenario, right? Death, right? Like they'll have that listed. I think if you tell people and you're upfront and honest, then I think it's ethical, right? Like if they know what to expect and you never lied to them, then I can't see why it would be unethical, right? Even if they do suffer.
If something did happen to that person and you know you had a hand in that, would you not feel morally obligated to do something about it?
See, I guess this ties back to the first question this conversation
exactly
started with,
right? Like there's all these different, you know, another con with this is that consequences may be unpredictable, which is, as I was saying, you know, you can do the right number of things for the best number of people, but the consequences to those that you're not doing the right thing for are completely random. Like you have no clue what's going to happen. It's the entire thing about a vaccine trial.
But put yourself in this situation then. If you were the doctor that administered that vaccine and 10 people or even one person, let's say, died out of the 100, do you feel like that death was on you if you upfront, you told them all the consequences and the likelihood of them actually passing away?
I think if I was a professional in that situation and I'd been practicing for a certain amount of time, I would feel guilty, but I wouldn't think that it was on me, but I'd still feel guilty because as a professional, that's your imperative. You're like, okay, I've done this to someone. I've done the greatest good for the greatest number of people. This is what helps. And, you know, I'm not saying that sacrifices need to be made. They 100% don't. If a medical practitioner got everything right, no one would die. You know, there'd be no casualties, no fatalities.
But that's not very likely, is it?
It's not very likely. And that's the realism when it comes to giving, you know, vaccine trials. Like the whole thing about hydroxychloroquine and all that, you know, hydroxychloroquine worked because it stopped viral replication in the cell. It worked on ACE receptors, which lie in basically we'll call it the cell membrane of the cell. And when COVID interacted with that, it would basically stop the replication of that cell by not allowing an enzyme through. So that enzyme basically stopped completely. But the problem with hydroxychloroquine is that it was very, very toxic. So it would basically cause cells to go through what was called apoptosis, which basically means they just explode. So it's programmed cell death. So it would basically trick the cells into thinking that they needed to die. It could also stem to necrosis, which is basically, necrosis is what you think it is, like necrotic cells, they just begin to die away anyway. So that was kind of, it had promising effects first, but that's the point of like trials in the first place. Like trials are necessary because we need them to see, okay, whether they be animal trials or human trials, and absolutely there's always ethical problems with both. And you know, you obviously, a sane person, or what I would call a sane person, doesn't necessarily want harm to come of anything. Like you wouldn't say like, okay, we're going to test these rats. If 90% of them die, who cares, right? It's always, we want the most amount of people to survive anyway. One, because we want that vaccine to work. And two, because we care about life. And that's the reason we're doing this, is so more people can live. But I think there is you have to have a certain bias when it comes to getting results, in that not all results are going to be good, and you have to accept that no matter what you're doing, which is upsetting. And yeah, I think that's something people have to get past. But hey, moving on to the next one anyway. Principalism. which kind of is what it is. Act to promote established ethical principles. So basically, follow the rules. Um, so basically, you identify, just reading the dot points here as well, you identify the relevant principles in each situation and act accordingly to those principles. So what do these principles about ethics say about this situation? What should I do? And then if your principles conflict, so like obviously giving vaccine to one person, giving vaccine to another, you focus on the most important principle for the given situation. So is that person going to die sooner, or is that person going to die sooner? Who do we give the medicine to? Like that's kind of the point, especially when it comes to like vaccine trials. Like, you know, one elderly, one young, who do we give the vaccine to? Like some people would say, oh, it's, you know, the elderly man has lived a long enough life. Like he doesn't necessarily need that vaccine any more than that child does. Like that child's still got so much more to go. But the chances of killing this child are 50% greater than killing the elderly man, just because of how, you know, the body works. So it's those kind of principles. If they conflict, you kind of have to consider like, okay, I guess this is all about ethics. Yet again, everything is about ethics, because you can't. I think I've always been taught that, you know, you can't give one without the other. But if you only had one vaccine, what would you do? These are the kind of things that we're not actually taught until you're taught. Yeah, like you don't grow up learning about, okay, if I only have one, who do I give it to?
But I don't know how it works in the sort of medical field. Because you just listed what 4 or 5 different ethical principles that you could follow. Who determines which out of the 4 you actually go by?
I think these are more so interpersonal ethic theories. So in that, the next one that I'm about to say kind of more goes to people that work in a field like nursing, or let's say anything like healthcare workers. So basically, they want to consider people's feelings. Like they don't want to hurt people. Whereas, you know, someone with principalism or consequentialism is probably more likely to come from like a medical field, in that they'll probably do the greatest good for the number of people. You know, people that are on deontology or virtue ethics are probably like more political. Like, you know, you have obligations to politics. Like they wouldn't necessarily know what these principles are, but you could probably fit them in one of these categorically, if that made any sense as well. Like,
no, it made sense, because it seems like the way you put it is, it depends how many people you're sort of impacting, depends on which one you choose. Because like this, you're talking about interpersonal.
Yeah.
If it's one-on-one, then you have a lot more freedom to sort of
yeah, exactly. Like,
understand what that particular person feels, right? Whereas you don't really have the time and to understand how exactly 100 different people feel, because
oh yeah, absolutely.
everyone's feelings are so complex. It's like impossible to balance all 100, right? And we're talking about 100. That's like a very small number.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, I think that the ethical principles are so difficult to describe, and I think a lot of people have difficulties determining the differences between them, because ethical principles are there to guide you through. Like, you could look up these principles, but in a moment you have no clue what to do with the situation. Like, you could say, okay, what do I do about this situation? You could go on Google and search that up, but I guarantee you, if you're more of an emotional person, you're going to go with your gut. If you're more of a logical person, I think I'm a bit of both. I'm a very emotional man. Okay, I'm not afraid to admit it. It's a good thing, everybody.
Crying is completely normal.
Exactly. But if you're looking at a situation from a logistics view, you're going to be like, okay, I should keep my emotions out of this because I need to do that. Whereas if you're an emotional person, you're going to be like, okay, I care for this person. Should I tell them a lie to, you know, keep them? Like, that's the same with the dementia patient that I was talking about before. A person focused on care ethics, which is the one that I said was next up, they would probably tell that person a lie, saying, okay, look, your husband will be coming later today to visit. Because that person has dementia, you're telling them a white lie to keep them from that kind of harm. You know, whereas someone with a consequentialism kind of, I don't know, act or ethics theory kind of lies to the wife, and also tells her that he will come visit later that day because you're doing the greatest number for the greatest good, in that you're not hurting that wife's feelings. Even then, although it can appear cold at sometimes, because you think like that, you're not making that person sad. Whereas it comes to, deontology, for example, or virtue ethics, you're being, courageous and rashful. You're essentially appearing cold, but you're getting that point across. Like, you're acting in accordance with the moral rules. Like, I shouldn't lie to this person. Why should I lie to this person? They're no different from anyone else. So I think nurses and, health practitioners, chiropractors, everyone that works in a medical field kind of has to consider, okay, I could lie to this person about something, but if it's something serious, like if someone has dementia, like there's that, do I lie to them or do I not lie to them? Because, they're going to forget it tomorrow. But then again, it's like, I'm still lying to that person. What do I do about it? So I just thought that was really interesting. I thought I'd share that with you because
if you're just truthful, I think it's just ethical, right? Like, is there really ever a time you like?
But I think, say this lady's husband has just died, and then you've just found out that her sister has died as well on the exact same day.
Mm.
For someone with dementia, would you, if that person had dementia, would you tell them?
Well, I think it's even like astronauts, right? Like if somebody is in space and their family member dies, they don't tell them, but it's not really lying. It's just hiding it or like delaying the truth, kind of. Like, I don't know if I guess what you mean.
But then is more harm going to come from you preventing or say delaying the truth than you telling them immediately? Because say they come back after 3 years or however long a space mission is. Let's say, I think
the maximum is like 1 year that someone's done, and that's that's a stretch.
That's a stretch.
That guy really had to like agree to that and like train mentally for that. So that's like the longest I think anyone's done.
Say you go up for like 2 months or something, and I don't know, your wife or something dies like a month into it. Ethically, do you tell that astronaut that she's just died? Because he's at serious health risk up there. If he's worried, if you've got to be prepared, mentally. If you're not up there mentally ready, you've got to come back down. Like it's a the problem is different environment.
You can't really tell him because he can't do anything about it anyway, right? You're just going to make him suffer mentally, like internally.
Exactly, but
so you wouldn't tell him. But you're not going to lie and say that. I guess.
But someone that cares about him is probably like, okay, yeah, look, this happened. But as someone that's thinking logically, they're going to be like, oh no, let's wait to tell him once he comes down. So say, like, there's completely different ways to think about things. Whereas something that's very, historically speaking, doing human drug trials is very much we tell them everything that's happening so that we're not legally liable. We give them the drug or the vaccine. We see what happens. We record it. If anything happens, it wasn't our fault because we warned them. From my point of view, I think that's how it works, which isn't always necessarily good. Like that's not a good thing. Like obviously,
there's not this. Can you think of a way around that?
No, there is no way around it. That's the problem.
It is. Yeah, it definitely poses ethical questions, but like we can't really progress if we don't take risks.
No. Survival of the fittest.
Kind of. It's also like the whole yin yang, right? You can't have life without death. Can't have pleasure without suffering.
I think even people going for like eternal life and like life extension, like, oh, in 20 years we're going to be able to live until we're like 130, 120.
Well, I think they already said the person who's born now will live to be immortal. Not that like they'll have the cure, but the thing is they'll be able to prolong their life like in stages so that like they'll technically never die because they'll keep prolonging it. And I think they already said that person's alive today.
But
but then it poses the question, because you're alive, but are you living?
But like, I don't even know how that's going to be possible. How's that going to be possible? like surely you get bored after a while. I understand life is about achieving what you want to achieve from life. That's the point of life, I think. From personally, I think life is about achieving what you want to achieve,
Is that your
not what others
purpose?
want you to achieve. I think so, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Which is weird because a lot of people don't. I don't think a lot of people can say, "Oh, what's the purpose of life?" And you say, "Well, this is the meaning of life." Well, that's what I say anyway. In that you're supposed to do what you think is right, not what other people think is right, which I think can be taken the wrong way a bit sometimes, especially with like extremists. Like, but
Well,
I think,
if your moral codes are completely out of whack, then yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it'll come across
And
weird.
I'm honestly, if you're thinking from like that kind of perspective, what like an extremist group could absolutely think that what they're doing is the right thing. But obviously, from a moral standpoint, from everyone else, like regardless of what religion you follow, whether it's a cultural or anything, the reason they're doing that is because okay, they follow this religion that is similar to ours in just a few ways. That's it. They're doing this because that's what they believe in, and what we believe in is different from person to person, even if you are following the same culture or same practice. Like you're
Well,
not going to
I
have
know he talks about like universal ethics, right? Like I think there is, even if everyone has their own beliefs and stuff, there must be like a group of like universal ethics that say do not kill, do not steal. Like these, like even if you don't have a religion that
they are
live
universal
by,
ethics
that
though.
seems like something that should just come from like purity of
But
heart.
that's moral code. That's completely different. That's basically like that's what you're taught when you're growing up. That's like learning. You've learned that you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't kill. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't cheat.
But like even
That's
though you're
what.
told that throughout life, I feel like even if you just sort of get to a point in life where you are able to create your own morals and not sort of base it on like tradition and like societal norms, and I think there's still a point where you internally would come to the conclusion that stealing and killing is bad, right?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. Am I wrong to
100%.
think that?
Yeah. No,
Because I've been reading a lot of Nietzsche recently. Friedrich Nietzsche. It's
Nietzsche.
like, you heard of Nietzsche?
Nietzsche. How do you spell that?
Oh, it's like it's German. It's like Niestzche, something like that. But
Oh,
he
it's spelled
told,
like niche.
yeah, Nietzsche, Friedrich
Niche.
Nietzsche. But
Nietzsche.
because he has this interesting philosophy. He's a philosopher from like the 18th century, 19th century. That talks about the three stages of life, and I found these thoroughly interesting. I actually got introduced this from like a YouTuber. Can't remember his name. He's an INFJ, so he's a bit of a philosopher himself. But it talks about the third stage in life is sort of when you don't. It's the child stage, he puts it, where
Oh,
you're no longer constrained or weighed down by society, right? And that you create these universal ethics. And it's sort of that contradiction, right? Where it's like if everybody has their own, if everybody is so liberated and free to the point where they don't um,
wow, that's really interesting.
base their beliefs and like morals on what people tell them to believe,
Yeah.
is there chaos or does there become order? And like I feel like I'm somewhat reaching that stage, and I feel like it seems to me that even though that you may defy sort of what society like this the traditions tell you, it seems that there is still this pure morality behind things that you do. Like you're not.
Yeah. No, I'm literally reading it now, and he's got.
Oh, you should do it. You should read more after this pod, like after we stop. It's. I
Yeah.
feel like he's a bit of a nihilist. And he's really, I think um, the seed for atheism. Like he was the one who actually came out and said God is dead, which is a
Yep.
pretty profound statement if you think about it. But
Especially
we
from the
can
time
probably
that he
talk. We
was
can
in.
probably talk about this in another podcast because you can talk about
We can.
Nietzsche and his philosophies for a good amount of time. But I just
Yeah.
thought this whole idea of universal ethics and how if everybody gets to a child stage and creates their own ethics, what
I think
happens
the
then?
problem with the one issue with philosophy is that people are always going to question your motives for thinking that. I think especially someone with someone that's believing in God, if you suggest even minorly, they are 100% allowed to have the beliefs that they have. But as soon as you question their beliefs, they will hate you. It's not
But
because,
but do they hate
like,
you because they don't know where their beliefs are? Because if you ask a Christian the question that if you lived in Afghanistan or a Muslim country,
yeah,
would you still be Christian, or would you follow what society deems as normal in that society? Like, are your Christian beliefs that strong and you actually believe them? Because I'm completely fine with people having beliefs, right? But it's, do they know where those beliefs stem from?
yeah, I think that's a massive issue because that's. I did kind of phase out for a minute there, but I understand exactly what you're talking about.
I probably bored
I
you a
was,
little bit, to be
I
honest.
was, I was, I was looking at the recording button for some
Uh,
weird ass reason.
I just hope there's enough space on my laptop to
Oh, there will be, but I
have
think,
all
I
this.
think, I think we've honestly been talking for about 40 minutes, 40 minutes anyway, so we can probably end it here. To be honest, I think this is
We're
pretty
gonna
good.
leave them on that.
Leave
We're
them on
gonna
that.
leave them
Well, they
on.
can think. They can think. People can think.
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, think about where your beliefs come from, because everyone has beliefs, right? And
Yeah,
we're not here to tell you that they're wrong. We're just here to tell you or make you question why you have those beliefs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everyone is absolutely allowed to have their own beliefs.
And I've
I
actually really enjoyed those more like those
ethical theories.
theories of ethics. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
they're
yeah,
they're,
I can
they're
see
interesting.
how each one has a different place,
Approach.
a different
Yeah,
role to play in different
yeah. Different
scenarios.
approach and like what's happening and all that.
Mm.
So anyway, we hope you enjoyed. I think this is episode 4.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is episode 4.
episode 4.
The other one was just bonus.
Bonus. We'll either post that one before this or after this. But hey, so thank you for watching.
Thank you for
We
listening.
hope you have enjoyed. Maybe next episode we might get a guest.
Hopefully. Yeah, we'll see.
Hopefully,
It's a bit
we'll see how we're going. I think it is a lot easier to get a guest on like this because they're probably going to have their own microphone at home anyway, probably their own camera as well, so it work out really well. And hopefully the audio quality on this is pretty good. I think it has been. I'm listening through it to the headset anyway, so hey,
But yeah,
thanks
just
again.
remember to stay positive and always be curious.
Yeah, always curious. See ya.
Ciao.